The storm broke at midnight. In a dim hospital corridor, Ava stood frozen, her mother's final words still trembling in the air like the echo of a bell. "You were never meant to carry this alone." Ava blinked, trying to hold back the tears, but the truth had landed like a blade, cutting clean through memory. The woman she adored had whispered a name, one Ava had never heard before. A father? A monk? A lie? Her chest tightened as the monitors behind her fell silent. It wasn't just death she was facing, it was an unraveling. The nurse stepped in quietly, placing a hand on Ava's shoulder. "She found peace," the nurse said softly. But peace was not what Ava felt. She felt untethered, shattered. The ceiling lights flickered, and time seemed to warp around her. Ava took one step backward, then another, her breath shallow, her heartbeat a frantic drum. The hallway stretched infinitely. That name echoed again inside her, Tenzin, a secret that now belonged to her alone. And it burned. Ava sat in her car, parked beneath the yellow haze of a street lamp. Her hands gripped the steering wheel, not out of control, but fear. The silence in the vehicle screamed. Every part of her body ached from holding itself together. Her phone screen glowed beside her, the last text from her mother still open. "If you want peace, find him." Ava whispered the name again, Tenzin, tasting the strangeness of it. Her mind raced. Was this a person? A place? A spiritual code? The questions flooded in, but answers were silent. The city hummed beyond the glass, like it was distant, like it didn't belong to her anymore. For the first time in her life, she felt like a ghost in her own story. Her reflection in the windshield looked unfamiliar, eyes hollow, lips pressed. Then slowly, deliberately, she turned the key. The engine purred to life. Her foot didn't move. Not yet. Her journey hadn't started, but it had definitely ended something else. As dawn crawled into the sky, Ava drove past sleeping suburbs and empty intersections. Her GPS blinked uncertainly on the dash. It had no address to guide her. She wasn't following roads. She was following a wound. Every mile away from the hospital felt like leaving part of herself behind. Her eyes were dry now, not because she had healed, but because there were no more tears left. "What are you looking for?" she whispered aloud, to no one, to herself. Her father? A past she never asked for? Her mother's forgiveness? The car's hum was the only reply. The highway stretched ahead like a thread unraveling a tapestry. Her thoughts flickered to stories of monks, to the Buddha's tales her mother used to share in passing. Suddenly, they felt like riddles, clues. But was this madness or clarity? As the rising sun lit the edge of the horizon, Ava drove on, not to find someone, but to remember something she'd forgotten, herself. She pulled into a dusty gas station, the kind that looked untouched by time. A stray dog watched her from a distance. The pump didn't work. No clerk inside. No one in sight. Ava stepped out, the wind sharp against her cheeks. In that desolation she didn't feel fear. She felt clarity. Her solitude was real. She whispered to herself again. Tenzin. The name didn't sound foreign anymore. It sounded familiar. As if it had always been inside her, waiting. The wind carried a paper across the concrete. It flapped against her foot. She picked it up. It was a faded flyer. An old image of a monastery, with the word silence scribbled beneath it in marker. No address. Just coordinates. Ava stared. Her breath caught. Was this coincidence? Or was someone guiding her? In that barren place she felt the first pull. Not from reason but from soul. The kind of pull that doesn't ask questions. Just demands movement. Back in the car, Ava entered the coordinates. The GPS paused, blinked, then rerouted. A small road off the main highway. No name. Just a line through forest. As the tires rolled forward, trees gathered like watchers on either side. The world narrowed, quieted. The radio fuzzed, then died. No signal. No music. Just breath. her own breath. For the first time, she noticed it. How shallow it had become. She inhaled slowly, deliberate. The kind of breath her mother used to guide her through when storms came, emotional ones. That breath carried something new this time. Intention. The dirt road climbed and turned, until a vast mountain face loomed ahead. There, carved into stone, was an archway. Old. Weathered. Silent. Ava stopped the car. She stared. She didn't feel afraid. Not anymore. The fracture inside her had become a compass, and it was pointing forward. The path behind the archway was narrower than Ava expected. Overgrown, crooked, almost forgotten. Moss blanketed the stones, and above her, ancient pines creaked in rhythm with the wind. Each step she took felt strangely heavy, as if the air itself thickened with memory. It was no longer just a trail. It was a threshold. Birds called from deep within the canopy, but even their sounds seemed distant, muted. Ava paused at a stone marker etched with faded script. The characters were foreign, but something in her gut stirred. She reached out, running her fingers along the grooves. The texture felt alive, like a pulse under stone. Her breath caught. She turned sharply. No one. And yet she felt watched, not by danger, but by presence. Was this the forest of her mother's bedtime stories? The path whispered in silence, "Keep going." Ava obeyed, not because she was brave, but because turning back now felt like betrayal. Further up the trail, Ava emerged into a hidden clearing. There, half swallowed by nature, stood a monastery, its stone bones weathered but proud. Vines wrapped around wooden pillars, and prayer flags fluttered faintly in the breeze. For a moment, Ava froze. It was like stepping into a memory she didn't own. Her mother had drawn places like this on napkins when Ava was little, sketches lost in coffee stains and bedtime yawns. "You came," a voice called. Ava's heart lurched. A man stood at the monastery steps, hands folded before him, his robe saffron and wind-touched. He looked older than time, eyes like still water, unmoved by surprise. Ava didn't speak. Couldn't. He offered only a small bow. "You are not late," he said gently. "Only newly arrived." His voice wrapped around her like warmth in cold rain. She took a single step forward. Her silence was its own answer. The monk led her through the monastery in silence. The halls breathed age, polished stone worn smooth by generations, lanterns swaying with stories. Ava followed closely, her footsteps careful. They entered a small chamber, lit by morning sun, spilling through lattice windows. Floor mats in perfect lines, a bowl of water at the center. "What is this place?" Ava finally whispered. The monk knelt slowly and motioned for her to join. "A space for forgetting," he said, "and remembering." She sat. The silence pressed in, but not with weight, with invitation. "Who are you?" she asked. The monk looked at her but didn't answer. Instead, he placed a folded paper in front of her. It was a torn photo, her mother, smiling beside this very man. Ava's fingers trembled. "Tenzin," she whispered. He nodded once. "She carried you through storms," he said. "Now you must learn to walk without them." Ava sat alone now, the photo still resting between her knees. Her mother's face smiled up at her, years younger, carefree in a way Ava had never seen. She knew him. Ava whispered to the room. Not just knew, trusted. Loved? Questions spiraled. Her mother had kept this whole life hidden. Why? Ava wanted to scream. Instead, she breathed. Deeply. Once. Twice. The kind of breath the monk had demonstrated before silently leaving her. With each inhale, the pain cracked a little. And something older emerged. Something wordless. Her eyes closed. The room around her blurred. She could still feel the wood beneath her knees, but now she also felt water, wind, sunlight, as if the memory in the photograph was rising to meet her. She opened her eyes. Calm, Not fixed, but no longer breaking. The first piece of herself had returned, not through answers, but through stillness. Outside, the air had changed. The sky had turned a gentler blue, and the mountain winds had softened. Ava stepped through the temple doorway barefoot, each footfall grounding her. Tenzin waited in the garden, trimming a bonsai tree. He looked up, offering a soft smile. "You remembered to breathe," he said. Ava chuckled, the sound surprising even herself. "I didn't realize I'd forgotten." He nodded. "Most do." She sat beside him, watching his steady hands. "Why didn't she tell me?" Ava asked. Tenzin didn't pause. "Because she knew you'd come when it was time, and not a moment sooner." Silence again, but now it felt like companionship. The garden was wild but beautiful, each leaf a reminder that even chaos grows in pattern. Ava didn't feel healed, but she felt rooted, as if her soul had touched earth for the first time in years. The morning ritual began before sunrise. Tenzin's footsteps whispered across the stone floor as he lit incense and placed offerings beside a small shrine. Ava observed from the doorway, unsure if she was intruding. "You may join," Tenzin said without turning. She stepped in quietly, kneeling beside him. The scent of sandalwood filled the air, and in the flickering candlelight, Ava saw more than just ceremony. She saw devotion. "Why incense?" she asked. Tenzin smiled softly. "Because it disappears." Ava looked puzzled. "So do we," he added, "but we leave fragrance behind." The thought settled into her bones. Every gesture, every word, leaves something. She closed her eyes. Her mother had once said something similar, but Ava had forgotten. That memory returned now, not as pain, but presence. In that moment, she stopped thinking. She just breathed, for no reason other than to feel herself existing in the silence. Later that day, Tenzin handed Ava a broom. "We sweep every morning," he said simply. Ava blinked. "Too clean to see," he replied. Confused but curious, she followed him to a courtyard scattered with autumn leaves. She began to sweep. At first her motions were stiff, mechanical, but slowly, rhythm took over. The bristles scraped softly across the stones, and her breath aligned with each stroke. Her thoughts slowed. The courtyard, once chaotic with fallen leaves, began to clear, and with it, so did the haze in her mind. "Still think this is about dust?" Tenzin asked, sitting nearby. Ava smiled faintly. "It's not." He nodded. "Balance begins in motion, even sweeping." Ava paused, letting the wind brush past her face. She realized then that the act of doing, when done with presence, could be healing. She swept again, this time not to finish, but to feel. That afternoon, the lesson shifted. Tenzin led Ava to a stream tucked behind the monastery, a quiet place with water that sang over polished stones. "Watch the current," he instructed. Ava sat on a mossy rock, eyes fixed on the ripples. "It flows because it doesn't resist," he said. "It bends, not breaks." Ava nodded, but her thoughts rebelled. "But what if I'm tired of bending?" she asked. Tenzin did not flinch. "Then be still. Even the river rests in pools." Silence fell again, broken only by the steady rhythm of water. Ava leaned forward, letting her fingers graze the cold stream. The chill grounded her. Her life had been a storm, constant motion, emotional floods. But here was something different. Surrender without weakness. Stillness without escape. She let the stream run between her fingers and whispered, "Maybe I've been resisting myself." Tenzin only smiled and turned away. That was answer enough. That evening rain rolled in. A soft, unrelenting drizzle. The monastery became a symphony of drops tapping stone, wood, and leaves. Ava lay awake, staring at the ceiling beams above her mat. Memories stirred, arguments with her mother, the day she left home, words said in anger and regret. They didn't come like knives now, but as echoes. The rain outside matched their rhythm. She sat up, unable to rest. Wrapped in a shawl, she walked barefoot to the veranda. Tenzin was already there, sitting silently, watching the night. "Can't sleep?" he asked gently. "Too much noise," she replied. He nodded. "Then, listen deeply." Ava stood beside him, the rain soaking the edges of her shawl. For the first time, she didn't try to shut the noise out. She let it enter, flow through. And in that surrender she noticed something. The quiet inside had never left. She just hadn't listened. By the third morning, Ava no longer waited to be told what to do. She rose before the bell, dressed in silence, and stepped into the courtyard with intention. The fog hung low, clinging to her skin like breath. She lit incense on her own, swept the stones without prompt, sat beside the stream without asking. Tenzin watched her from afar. There were no ceremonies, no chants, just the slow unfolding of presence. In the stillness, Ava began to notice things. Spiders weaving silver threads between branches, the warm scent of wet cedar, her own breath curling visibly in the morning chill. Life wasn't something she needed to chase anymore. It had been here, patiently waiting, in the spaces between noise. She placed her hand on her heart and felt it beating, not as a burden, but as a rhythm. The rhythm of staying, of being, of beginning again. Ava returned to the meditation chamber with a question that burned too long. "Tenzin," she asked, "why did my mother leave this place?" He did not answer at first. He simply turned over a small wooden box and handed it to her. Inside lay letters, aged, ink-blurred, but unmistakably in her mother's handwriting. Ava unfolded the first page with trembling hands. It was addressed to Tenzin. Words of love, of separation, of fear, and one sentence that caught her breath. Ava must never know the truth, not because she cannot handle it, but because the world would not accept her if she did. Ava blinked. Her pulse roared in her ears. "What does that mean?" she asked. Tenzin met her eyes gently. "Your mother was not just a seeker, she was a novice, a monk." Ava's mouth opened, but no sound came. "She left the robe when she became your mother," he said. "But she never left the path." Ava's whole self stilled, like a lake holding lightning. She wandered the temple grounds for hours, the truth twisting inside her. Her mother, a monk, a renunciant who left for love, for her. And why the secrecy? Ava stopped near a prayer wheel and gripped its handle. "Why didn't she tell me?" she muttered. The wheel spun under her hand, creaking softly like old truths turning. She had always felt like she didn't belong, an outsider at school, at work, even in family. Now she understood why. Her roots were hidden in silence, her identity layered in shadow. "Am I a lie?" she whispered. A single leaf fell at her feet. She stared at it, then turned the wheel again, slower. Tenzin's voice echoed in memory. "You were not forgotten. You were protected." For the first time she questioned whether secrecy had been an act of love, and whether knowing the truth was a burden or a gift. Her hands stopped. The wheel did too. That night, Ava lit a candle for her mother in the shrine room. Her hands no longer trembled. She watched the flame flicker, thinking of the woman who had lived two lives, one of discipline, one of devotion. Tenzin entered quietly and sat beside her. "She loved fiercely," he said. "She broke rules for you." Ava nodded. "And I hated her for her silence." "Sometimes silence is mercy," he replied. "Sometimes it's fear." Ava turned toward him. "And which was hers?" Tenzin looked to the flame. "Both." They sat in silence, the candle dancing between them. "She said you saved her," Ava whispered. "No," Tenzin corrected. "We saved each other. In silence. In truth. In separation." Ava looked into the flame. It didn't matter if her mother had lied, it mattered that she had loved. Deeply. Ava felt the burn of forgiveness rising. Not easy, not clean, but real. Ava dreamed that night, not of memories, but of a quiet field under a red sky. Her mother stood at the center, robed in white, hair flowing, eyes calm. "You were never broken," her mother said, only unfinished. Eva walked toward her, but every step was slow, as if time had thickened. "I wanted to protect you from pain," her mother continued. "But I didn't see that you were born to carry it, transform it." Eva reached out, but just before their hands met, her mother faded into wind. The field shifted into golden light, and Eva stood alone, but not empty. She woke up with tears in her eyes and a strange peace in her chest. The truth had not freed her, but it had deepened her. She wrote it in her journal before dawn. "Some legacies are made of silence, but I will speak." As dawn rose, Eva stood at the edge of the cliff near the monastery, overlooking endless mountains wrapped in morning mist. The air was cold, but her breath came steady. She opened her journal and read her own words aloud. "I will speak." Behind her, bells chimed softly, calling the monks to prayer. She didn't turn. She didn't need to. Her journey was no longer about finding someone. It was about uncovering the voice buried beneath silence. Eva closed the journal, held it to her chest, and let the wind rush through her hair. She was no longer seeking the past. She was walking toward herself, toward peace not given, but earned. She turned from the cliff and walked back toward the temple, not as a guest, but as someone reclaiming a truth, one breath at a time. The next morning, Tenzin led Eva to the highest ridge above the monastery. A single prayer wheel stood there, rusted with time, beside a cairn of stones. The wind was sharp, slicing through layers. Tenzin looked out at the jagged horizon. "Today you meet the silence without me," he said. Eva nodded, uncertain. "And if it speaks?" she asked. "Then listen. If it doesn't, listen harder." He bowed and left her alone. Eva sat before the cairn, her heart pounding. The silence was deafening. Her thoughts screamed, memories, regrets, unfinished conversations. She tried to breathe, but her breath shook. "What if I fail?" The question echoed like thunder. Her hands clenched into fists. The wind howled around her. And then, without warning, she screamed. Not in anger, but release. The sound tore from her like a storm breaking. And then, silence again. But now, it felt different. Not heavy. Empty. What? Spacious. Eva wept, not in pain, but in presence. Hours passed. The sun crept higher, shadows shortened. Eva remained still. Her scream had left her hollow, but not broken. Her body trembled, not from fear, but from recognition. Something inside had shifted. She reached into her coat pocket and pulled out the torn photograph. Her mother and Tenzin, smiling, wrapped in a moment that once felt foreign. She placed it atop the cairn and whispered, "I forgive you." The wind lifted the edges but didn't steal it. Eva smiled softly. She realized then, this wasn't about finding her mother's past. It was about accepting her own beginning. She closed her eyes, hands open on her knees, and breathed, not to calm, but to arrive. In that inhale, she felt herself dissolve. In the exhale, she returned whole. The silence no longer frightened her. It welcomed her. And for the first time since arriving, she felt like she belonged, not to a place, but to herself. Tenzin met her at the monastery gates as she descended at dusk. "Oh." His eyes searched hers, not for answers, but for reflection. Eva didn't speak. She only bowed, low and slow. Tenzin returned the gesture. "You didn't run from the silence," he said. "No," Eva replied. "I became it." They walked side by side through the evening haze. Temple bells rang distantly, and the scent of evening jasmine filled the air. "Will the pain return?" she asked. Tenzin didn't pause. "Of course, but now it won't own you." Eva exhaled. For so long she had feared returning to herself. Now she saw that the storm wasn't her enemy. It was her teacher. She would be proud, Tenzin said. Eva smiled. I think she already was. And for the first time, that thought didn't make her ache. It made her rise taller, walk steadier. The wound wasn't gone, but it had become a doorway. Inside the temple, Ava knelt before the same altar where her journey had begun. This time she did not seek. She offered. A strand of her hair, a folded page from her journal, a single jasmine flower. I am not the silence, she whispered. But I honor it. She lit incense, not for a ritual, but for release. Smoke curled around her, rising in loops toward the wooden ceiling. She imagined her mother's voice, not speaking, but humming. A lullaby. One she barely remembered, but now felt woven into her breath. Ava wept again, but this time her tears were not of pain. They were sacred. They watered the part of her that was growing. The part that had forgiven the past not by forgetting, but by facing it completely. When the incense burned low, she stood, bowed to the altar, and turned. She did not look back. Her eyes were fixed forward. That night, Ava did not sleep. She sat outside beneath a canopy of stars, the kind of sky only seen far from city lights. Her eyes tracked the constellations as if decoding ancient messages. Her breath, slow and even. Her pulse, calm. She wasn't trying to heal anymore, because she understood, healing isn't an end. It's a way of walking. A continuous return. Tenzin joined her silently, handing her a cup of warm tea. What now? He asked. Ava smiled. I walk, and I teach others how. Tenzin nodded, not in approval but in witness. They drank in silence. The stars above seemed closer now. Ava no longer feared returning to the world, because she now carried silence with her. Not as absence, but as presence. The fracture had become her light. Her journey didn't end here. It began, at last, with the full weight of her truth, and the freedom to share it. The next morning, Ava stood before the monastery gates with a small satchel over her shoulder. The air was still, as if the world itself held its breath. Tenzin approached slowly. Leaving already? He asked. Ava nodded. I have to. There are people waiting, people like me. He studied her face, the clarity, the gentleness beneath her strength. Will you return? Ava smiled. I never really left. She bowed, and he returned it, deeper this time. The world will not be kind, he warned. Then I will be kind enough to balance it, she replied. No more was said. There didn't need to be. Ava turned toward the winding forest path, her feet steady, her spine straight. The same road that once frightened her now welcomed her return. With every step she carried the silence, not as armor, but as breath. This was not a goodbye. This was the beginning of service. Ava returned to the city, but it no longer held her in the same way. The noise, the speed, the endless grasping, it no longer pierced her center. Instead, she moved through it with stillness. She rented a small space, bare walls, soft light, a single low table at its center. On the door, she hung a sign, Quiet Within. She began offering silent sessions, no talking, no fixing. Just sitting. At first people scoffed. Then they stayed. And wept. And returned. She didn't teach doctrine. She offered space. Ava didn't tell them her story, not because she hid it, but because she had learned. Presence teaches louder than words. Some sat and left unchanged. Others stayed for hours. One day, a young woman whispered, I didn't know I needed this. Ava only smiled. She did. The silence was no longer hers alone. It had become a gift. In time, Ava found herself writing again. Not books. Letters. One by one, she wrote to those she had once withdrawn from. An old friend, an estranged cousin, even a former boss. Not apologies. Invitations. I was hurting. Now I'm listening. Some never replied. Others did. One came in person, hands shaking, voice cracking. I thought you hated me. Ava placed a hand over theirs and said gently, I hated myself. No teaching. No grand insight. just truth, just presence. That day, they sat in silence for over an hour, not speaking, just remembering what it meant to be seen. Ava knew healing didn't live in perfect words. It lived in shared breath. She mailed the last letter on a rainy evening, smiled at the sky, and said softly, "I'm coming home." But she didn't mean a place. She meant a state of being. She returned to the forest months later, not to the monastery but nearby. She set up a tent under the stars, no phone, no camera. Just herself, a journal, and a fire. At night, she stared into the flames and listened. Not to voices, not to memories, but to the quiet pulsing of her own breath. It no longer trembled. It flowed. One night, she dreamed of her mother again, but this time, not as a ghost. As a guide. They didn't speak. They walked side by side through the forest, their hands brushing occasionally. Ava woke up smiling, her eyes open before dawn. She sat by the fire, writing her final words into the journal. Peace was never out there. It was always the courage to sit with what's inside. She closed the book and let the fire have it. Not in grief, but in offering. At a quiet park bench months later, Ava sat with a child on her lap. Her niece, perhaps. They watched ducks on a still lake. The child leaned in and asked, "Why do you sit so quiet sometimes?" Ava smiled, brushing a curl behind the girl's ear. "Because I like hearing the inside of things." The child nodded, not fully understanding, but not needing to. "Can I sit quiet too?" Ava kissed her forehead. "You already are." They sat in silence, broken only by ripples in the water and the soft rustle of trees. Ava felt no need to explain, no urge to fill space. She had spent years running from silence, then years chasing it. Now, she simply lived in it. It was no longer an escape or a shield. It was breath. It was presence. It was her. And from that silence, life still spoke, softer, truer, and beautifully whole. Ava returned to the monastery once more, not to seek or to settle, but simply to sit. The seasons had shifted. Leaves had turned bronze, the air crisp with early winter. She walked the stone path slowly, her steps no longer hurried, her breath steady. Tenzin greeted her with no words, only a hand to the heart and a nod. Ava returned the gesture. Together, they walked into the garden where the bonsai tree had grown wider, its shape fuller. She sat beneath it, feeling its silent witness. "How long have you been shaping it?" she asked. "Since before you were born," Tenzin replied. "And the wantons, what remains pursuing true," Christau replied. "And when will it be finished?" Ava asked. He smiled gently. "When it dies." Ava looked at the tree again, not as a project, but as a companion in change. Like her. Not seeking perfection, only presence. They sat in the garden, without speaking. The wind moved gently, and neither tried to stop it. Inside the temple later that evening, Ava lit a single candle in the same chamber where her mother once trained. She knelt alone, but no longer felt lonely. In the silence, she could almost hear her mother's breath beside hers. Ava whispered, "I know now, you didn't leave me, you led me." Her voice didn't tremble anymore. It flowed like a mountain stream, soft, clear, unashamed. She placed a lotus petal on the altar, not for ceremony, for gratitude. In her mind, there was no image, no fantasy, just the warmth of acceptance. She touched the stone floor and bowed low, her forehead resting where many others had before her. Her tears returned, quiet and clean, as though cleansing something invisible. There was nothing left to uncover, no secret left to chase. Only this. Stillness. Ava opened her eyes to the flickering flame and felt it. Peace. Not silence, but presence with nothing left to run from. In the days that followed, Ava spent her time writing, not about her pain, but about her return. Not as memoir, but as offering. She didn't title the pages. She let them flow freely, without control. Tenzin watched her from afar. One evening, he brought her tea and said, "Will you publish it?" Ava smiled and shook her head. "No, it's already been received." He didn't ask by whom. He didn't need to. Ava no longer needed an audience. The act of expression was the release. Her voice had come full circle, not as sound but as stillness spoken on paper. She placed the final page beneath a stone near the shrine tree, and walked away. The wind didn't steal it. It only turned it slightly, as if reading. Ava exhaled deeply. Her story had never needed approval. Only truth. And now, it lived beyond her, in the silence she had once feared. The final morning came like breath, unnoticed until it filled everything. Ava stood on the edge of the same ridge where she once screamed. This time, she was silent. No storm inside her. Just wind, stone, sky. The world stretched endlessly, but she no longer felt small. She no longer searched the horizon for answers. She simply watched, knowing she was a part of it now. Tenzin stood behind her, silent. She turned and embraced him, briefly, gently, fully. No words passed between them. Only presence. "Where will you go?" he finally asked. "Anywhere," she said. "And everywhere." The wind picked up, lifting strands of her hair, carrying no sound, only stillness. She stepped away, walking the path alone, barefoot this time. Each step met the earth like a promise. Wide. She didn't need to know the future. She was already living her answer. And as she walked, the world did not shift beneath her feet. She did. No applause followed. No chorus of angels. Just footsteps on a dirt path. A whisper in the trees. And a breath. That was enough. The sky above her expanded endlessly, and the silence did not intimidate her. It welcomed her. Ava smiled, not because she had arrived, but because she was finally walking, without needing to arrive. Her story, once tangled in pain, now unfolded like a leaf in morning light. She closed her eyes for a moment, listened, and heard nothing. And in that nothing, everything waited. Her final words, never spoken aloud, rose quietly in her mind. Peace isn't the end of suffering. It's the beginning of presence. She opened her eyes, took another step, and kept walking. The world remained vast. She was no longer lost inside it. She was home,